This isn't a self-help video. I'm not going to give you some insane morning routine, 3 hours of meditation while simultaneously sunning your gooch and eating animal organs dipped in honey. I'm not going to sell you a course on how to be a millionaire when the only way that I became a millionaire was selling courses on how to become a millionaire. Or give you some ridiculously obvious advice like, making $1 million is easy. All you got to do is sell something for $1 million and then you're a millionaire. Wow, wish I would have thought of that one. The point of this talk is to dive into what it means to be truly optimal as a human being and how you can improve your life. I've conquered every goal I've ever set out to achieve. I've had academic success, monetary success, I've built an impressive physique, but more than anything, I'm extremely happy with my life and proud of it. And unfortunately, that's something not a lot of people can say. The following's a talk I gave a few months back at the Silverback Summit, and I spoke among other people like Stan Efferdine, Bedros, Dave Lee, and tons of world-renowned physicians. We all came together to speak about physical vitality, mental resilience, spiritual depth, and how to intricately weave them together to produce an optimal human being.
Dr. Adam Hotchkiss.
Nice to meet you all. That was an awesome introduction. Allie, I literally had got done telling Allie that I hate the word optimization because everybody just throws it out there. And I find most guys, what they think is optimal is that they look really good and they have really good sex. And that's about it. They don't really care. I mean, they don't care if their lipids are sky high and their insulin resistance. As long as they're looking good on the beach and they're, getting a lot of good sex, then they're optimal. And that's not the case. So I hate that word optimal or optimize. And so Allie, I think, kind of just did this to piss me off, essentially. But no, we're going to talk about what I think is optimal, which is different for everybody. And I'll get to that. But first, just a few disclosures here, because this is a medical talk. And if I talk about lab work and things, I am a partner provider at Metabolic Health. So obviously, I have a bias towards in-depth lab work. But I also want to say that my opinions here do not necessarily represent Merrick. I always stress Smokey out a little bit when I'm up here talking. When I did the Mark Bell Power Project, when I got off, he was like, dude, you somehow you insulted Lane Norton and Carnivore MD in the same sentence or something like that. And I'm like, shit, I did. He's like, and you talked about doing trend. Shit, I did. So Merrick doesn't necessarily agree with everything that I say. I'm just going to put that out there right now. Yeah, who am I? I grew up not in this space whatsoever. If I would have told my younger self 10, 20 years ago that this is where I'd be, I would say you're crazy. I had long hair, skinny jeans. Dave and I would have got along great. I was a little punk rocker like Dave was. We were both skinny little punk kids. I was a skater. I couldn't care less about health whatsoever. I never thought I would get into this. But being that skinny little kid, interestingly, even though I didn't care about health, I somehow still cared about the way that I looked. And I developed an eating disorder, which kind of just came out of the blue. I didn't even really realize I had it until one day I did, when I kind of found myself throwing up after meals. And I'm like, fuck, something is really wrong here. Luckily, I was able to kind of pull myself out of that by finding fitness. And by finding fitness, I found that I needed to eat to meet these goals that I had for my physique. So food was no longer, it's going to make me fat. I was fine with getting fat so I could build some muscle. But it was really fitness as that catalyst that changed everything for me. Because of my love of fitness, I went on to just continue to progress. I started out as a personal trainer, but I'm somebody who, whenever I do anything, I give it 110%. That's why, I want to look good, I develop an eating disorder. And then I want to look good and I do all kinds of steroids. I want to get into science, so I become a doctor. Like, I do everything 110%. So I was a personal trainer, and then I thought maybe I could be like a nurse or something. I thought, no, I could be better. I kept going on and on until I decided I will be a doctor one day. So I did finally, later on in life, go to college, and I got a dual bachelor's degree, one in sociology, where I studied and published papers on male body image because that was very close to me, obviously, and chemistry, mainly to fit the requirements for pre-med. Went on and got my doctorate, and then I went and did a 4-year residency in podiatric medicine, and I did an extended credential in rear foot reconstructive surgery. So the question is probably, why the hell how do foot and ankles have anything to do with male hormone optimization? It has little. I mean, I can make some connections, and I think my work in podiatric medicine really showed me what happens to men when they are not optimized, when their health is not optimized. I got into the field because I thought I'd be working with athletes. I thought I'd be doing trauma surgery on athletes and putting them back together. And that was maybe 2% of my practice. The other 98% of my practice was diabetic wound care and limb salvage. So I would see guys and I would be telling them, you've got diabetes, this could affect the nerves in your feet. And they'd say, yeah, I'll change everything. I'd see them in 6 months, they'd have a wound. I would nurse that wound for a long time. 6 months comes, I would have to cut off that toe. Another 6 months, I'd have to cut off that foot. Another 6 months, they're having a BKA. And when somebody has a below knee amputation within 5 years, they're probably dead. So this is what I was seeing. I didn't get into medicine to watch people just deteriorate and die. I wanted to make people healthy and give them this great thing that I experience in health and fitness. So because of that, I kind of changed my ways. I mean, I was out on the internet and I was very into this space. Like Ali alluded to and I alluded to a bit, I was big into PED use. I was using a lot of PEDs. I was much bigger than I am now. I was full-blown bodybuilder, full-blown abusing all kinds of anabolics and gear. And then I had this realization that this is really stupid too. I kind of was under this guise that steroids or hormones are okay. We're fine, it's healthy, it's fine. And then I realized when I dug into the literature, this is not fine. I literally remember thinking I'm getting stupider as the days go on. I can't find my words. I'm always stuttering. My verbal acuity was awful. I was seeing wrinkles in my forehead. This is supposed to be a vitality thing. What's going on? So I got really into this space of kind of optimization. It was at that time that Derek of More Plates, More Dates saw me on Instagram, asked me to come along to Merrick and help with what they were doing there. So that's where I am here today. So I do have that medical background, but really it's a lot of self-experimentation, both on the PED side, which gives me a unique perspective, and then also on the health optimization, because I got very into my own longevity and health and optimization. So this is the big question. What are we optimizing for? And that's what, everybody has their own definition of what optimal is. Like I said, for most guys, can they have good sex and do they look good on the beach, and they could care less. But I have my own definition, so you guys are gonna have to listen to what I define health optimization as. Which is improving well-being and the quality of life while reducing and ideally preventing disease. And that's a big one, not just reducing, not just treating disease, but preventing disease. And it goes beyond simply avoiding the illness and focuses on achieving the highest level of functionality and vitality possible for an individual. And then I also like this caveat that health optimization is not about pursuing extreme measures or unattainable ideals. Instead, it's about making sustainable and realistic choices that enhance one's overall health and well-being. So we all know that Brian Johnson's not the one who does steroids. The other one, not Liver King, but the other one who's doing all these crazy biohacking things, that's not sustainable for most of us. Is it gonna work? Who knows? He likely will die at like 95 like the rest of us. So is that a good life? I would argue no. I'm all about doing things that are sustainable, that we can actually do and have a good life, and not only live a long life, but a healthy, functional life. So I look at 3 different vectors, and Ali asked me kind of not speak on testosterone. You guys are gonna hear all about testosterone today and all weekend, so we'll just leave hormones out of the equation. And I look at these 3 vectors for optimization. And I really think that all of these need to be in harmony. If one is out, you're not fully optimized if you are, say, very fit, but your psychological and spiritual health aren't there. Conversely, like I grew up in a very religious, spiritual household. My parents, for example, my dad is beyond fulfilled as far as his spirituality, but he's obese. He doesn't do anything for his health. That is not optimal, in my opinion. 2 out of 3 vectors are not optimized. And I think for a lot of us, we're really good at the first one. A lot of us here, I look around, everybody looks super healthy and everything, but is our psychological health okay, and is our spiritual health okay? I don't know, but as practitioners who are trying to optimize, we should take into account the entirety of a human. The human condition is not only the cellular level, there's deeper things here. So, kind of just to reiterate what I said, but for as far as physiology, we could go into this all day and we'll be talking about it a lot. The physiology part, though, it's not just testosterone. That's the smallest thing. As you heard them all saying up here, like the effects that you get from testosterone sometimes are minute, and they're one piece of a massive puzzle. Unfortunately, we advertise testosterone as if it's the end-all be-all. It's the answer to every issue that you have, and that's not always the case. I want to get more into the other things here, though, and I look at two other big factors. Metabolic health, because metabolic health, if it isn't optimized, if it isn't dialed in, it's going to cause so many other disease states. And then cardiovascular health, because cardiovascular health is very, very important when we're thinking about longevity, because most of us will die from cardiovascular disease, just the stats. So I like to focus on both of those when we're looking at the physiology. So we're looking at metabolic health. It is extremely complex. This is the metabolic systems within the human body. That small little circle kind of towards the middle is the Krebs cycle, which everybody knows. It's only one small part. Like metabolic health has tons of different mechanisms going on. We can't get to all of them today. But I do personally believe that glycemic control or insulin sensitivity is kind of at the heart of it. And a lot of us are just looking for actionable steps here. And we're obviously not going to give our patients that earlier diagram and try to dial in all of these. But if we work on this one thing, I think that we can help a lot. We can prevent a lot of disease, make people feel a lot better. So insulin sensitivity, like I said, so hot right now because everybody throws these terms out. Oh, you're insulin resistant. People don't even really know what that means. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a definition of what even is insulin sensitivity. So when we eat, our blood glucose rises. Glucose in our blood is not a great thing. We don't want high levels of that. It causes a lot of issues. Like I said, I was cutting off feet and legs. That was because their blood glucose was so high. It's basically crystallizing and destroying the structures. So we want it inside the cell. Insulin is the hormone that tells the glucose to go inside the cell. It kind of allows it to do so. So we eat, the blood glucose rises, our pancreas releases insulin, insulin signals the cells, let it in, and our blood glucose lowers. That's how things should work. The insulin resistance, this is the one that everybody kind of throws out there and uses as a panacea for, oh, your issue is insulin resistance. You don't even know. But basically our cells become resistant to that signal of insulin. So we need to produce more and more insulin to elicit the same response, and sometimes we completely stop eliciting that response, and that's why those blood glucose levels remain so high and cause those issues like cardiovascular disease, neuropathy, eye problems, kidney failure, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to dial in this metabolic health and improve the insulin sensitivity. The pathophysiology of insulin resistance, this is super complex, but you'll see a trend here, which is inflammation. There's some genetic kind of ideas out there that possibly it's due to polymorphisms, then how insulin resistance is happening in the adipose tissue. We have these fat cells, and fat cells cannot just expand to massive sizes. They have a limit, and when it hits that limit, we create hypoxia within that cell, and that hypoxia is going to stimulate inflammatory markers like which are called adipokines, like TNF alpha and IL-6, just two. There's other ones too. And then that inflammation is going to interfere with the signaling of the insulin. Also of note, all those adipokines, if that fat is around your organs and you're putting out these inflammatory molecules, you are inflaming the organ. You're causing damage to the organ. That's what like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, for example, is. And then fatty acids as well. This is something I see even with the carnivore community. They're having so many fatty acids in their diet. They can even cause insulin resistance without eating carbohydrates, and people are baffled by that. But us at Metabolic Health will tell you we see it a lot. We have this discussion all the time. I have this keto carnivore who has pre-diabetes. This doesn't make sense. Well, it does, because these high free fatty acids will accumulate in your liver and your muscles, and they're going to disrupt the signaling of that insulin. So there's other things. Mitochondrial dysfunction, basically, again, at the core of it is inflammation. The mitochondria kind of have a reduced capacity to deal with this oxidative stress, and these reactive oxygen species kind of take over, and that inflammation drives insulin resistance again. It's always kind of at the crux, inflammation. And then there's endoplasmic reticulum stress, which is basically your proteins are not folding correctly. And again, at the crux of it, inflammation. Gut microbiota is a new kind of area that we're looking at. Again, if you're guessing, I would say you're probably right that the inflammation is driving this too, because we're eating things that are gut or that aren't conducive to our own gut health, and we're driving up inflammation and skewing that insulin sensitivity. And then there's a ton of hormones, and I'm not going to get into that again, but there's hormones outside of just testosterone, outside of just insulin, et cetera, like cortisol. Growth hormone, IGF-1. So it's a really complex picture. Labs that I like to order when looking at insulin sensitivity. Fasting insulin is a huge one, and most people do not order this. Unfortunately, unless you've gone to a clinic like Metabolic Health or to some of the doctors in here who are working outside of insurance, you probably have never had a fasting insulin done. Fasting insulin is probably, in my opinion, I look at it much more than things like even A1C and glucose. The HbA1c is basically a measurement of the glucose over the past 90 days. A lot of you probably know this. The glucose is kind of affecting the red blood cell, changing it microscopically. We can look and say how much glucose has this red blood cell been exposed to. There's problems with this test, and so all of this is very nuanced. Again, if you just go through your normal medical route, they will tell you, oh, you have a 5.7 A1C, you're pre-diabetic, but hold on, wait a minute, maybe they're not. If they have good fasting insulin, they're lean, they don't look pre-diabetic, take a little bit deeper dive. Do something like a fructosamine, which isn't going to take into account the red blood cell. We're going to be looking at other proteins. So sometimes what happens is people have genetic differences in the length of their red blood cell. Sometimes our red blood cells will live longer than 90 days. If it lives longer than 90 days, it's going to be exposed to more glucose, but then it gets put up against the same algorithm of that 90 days, so you have more glucose exposure, and it looks like you're pre-diabetic when you might not necessarily be. So fructosamine is great. Look at things like thyroids, look at things like your lipids. If people have extremely high triglycerides, it's really a marker of their metabolic health. And then obviously look at the inflammatory markers, CRP, you can order IL-6, you can order things like homocysteine. And then uric acid is a really big one that I think it impacts the metabolic health too. With uric acid, it's kind of a question is it the chicken or the egg? Like is the uric acid causing poor metabolic health, or is the poor metabolic health causing rises in uric acid? I think it goes both ways. So it is a great metabolic marker. You'll see I don't have fasting glucose on there because I think it's kind of worthless. And really, again, if you go back to your normal primary care, usually they're only ordering fasting glucose and telling you that that's basically their measurement of you're okay or you're not. Fasting glucose is really just a small snapshot in time. And oftentimes we get labs first thing in the morning. I actually have had the people come to my house, so I'm rolling out of bed and they're knocking on the door and I get my fasting insulin done. What's happening at that time when we wake up? Where our cortisol is rising, that's what wakes us up, our body temperature increases, and that cortisol signals to the liver to produce glycogen or glucose. This is called gluconeogenesis. So we have high levels of fasting glucose, and if you wear a continuous glucose monitor, you usually see right when you're waking up, your glucose spikes. So then you see that you have a high glucose, and you think, oh no, I have something wrong. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe it's just because you got it first thing in the morning. So there's a lot of nuance to this stuff, and that's why we need these really in-depth labs. So how do we fix it? The easy stuff, we always say move more, eat less, and I know it's kind of cliche and it gets repeated, and of course it's more complex than this, but yes, this can really help most people. Most people have too much energy. They take in too much food, so reduce the energy intake, increase the energy expenditure. Lose the excess adipose tissue. So only about 10 to 20% of obese people are actually healthy. So you have an 80 to 90% chance of being metabolically unhealthy. That's why I hate this new movement of healthy at every size. Okay, 10 to 20% of people can be healthy. I get that, but that's not likely. You're much more likely to be unhealthy if you're overweight. So let's try to lose some weight. Especially not just weight, but fat. Let's try to improve your body composition. Building muscle is the best thing that we can do for metabolic health, hands down. Muscle is a massive reservoir for glucose. As I said, we don't want that glucose high in the blood. We need somewhere to put it. Muscle is that. So if we can just help people to build muscle, even if they do have fat under there, if we're getting them stronger and building more muscle, you'll usually see metabolic health improve significantly. Thyroid health, this is one that I see not tested or cared about enough. I wish that thyroid was advertised as much as testosterone is. I've seen thyroid have such bigger, more pronounced effects on somebody's well-being than testosterone, yet testosterone is touted as being this wonderful, miraculous thing. A lot of guys go on testosterone and go, I feel better, yeah, but they're not, blown away. Somebody has true hypothyroidism who fixes their thyroid feels significantly better. Their mood improves, their libido improves, their skin, hair, nails, everything improves. So thyroid is something that we really need to be looking a lot more at when we're looking at our clients. Don't just think of testosterone as the end-all be-all. Look at thyroid too. it is huge. And sometimes it's what's driving the low testosterone. So maybe you don't need to go on testosterone. Maybe just fix the thyroid, which to note is a lot easier to fix than testosterone. You can really trial thyroid on guys. It doesn't have as massive as a suppressive effect as testosterone does. So that whole panel, we were talking about fertility and things like that. Like testosterone is not something to take lightly. So if their thyroid is off too, try to fix that first, because if you come off thyroid, your TSH usually rebounds the next day. It's something that's, we don't have to be as concerned with of trying. So try to fix thyroid health. Thyroid, as I kind of allude to, it's essential for metabolic control, your development, your cardiovascular health, your mood, your sexual health, so it shouldn't be taken as lightly as it is. I know for a fact if we made it a controlled substance, suddenly every guy would be super pumped about it, because I think it's the legality of testosterone that makes it so sexy. It's because it's this illegal taboo thing. So if we could just make this one controlled too, I think more people would take more consideration of it. Things to test in your clients or your patients when you're looking at your thyroid health. Thyroid stimulating hormone, obviously the biggest one. That is the hormone that's stimulating the release of your thyroid hormones. Unfortunately, again, when you go to your primary care, you may get a TSH, you may only get a T4. Sometimes they get these crazy things like uptakes that we don't even really know how to interpret. These are the ones I think we should be getting though. T4, that's going to be your kind of inactive. I say inactive, that's kind of a catch-all. It's not fully inactive. It does work to some extent as well. And then your free T3, very important. Oftentimes in allopathic medicine, we only give T4, and then they get their lives back and their T4 and their TSH are fine, but the patient's still symptomatic. Why? Maybe there's an issue with their liver or their peripheral tissues where they're not converting enough T4 into T3. So we need to test T3 too. It's the active hormone. We need to see where those levels are and if those are good as well. Reverse T3. I have a question mark on this because this is something that, one, we don't test a lot of, and then it's something, I like the use of it and I also don't like the use of it, because again, this is a very lucrative business, this whole optimization space, and sometimes I think we inappropriately order labs and inappropriately treat things just to drive up money. And sometimes people feel completely fine and they're not symptomatic for hypothyroid, and then their naturopathic doctor or their TRT clinic orders a reverse T3 and it's high, and they tell them, you've got high reverse T3, you need a little bit of T3 in there. Well, why? They're not symptomatic and everything else is fine. I fully understand that reverse T3 can cause hypothyroid symptoms, so we should treat it if those symptoms are there. And for those of you who don't know what reverse T3 is, basically T4 has these 4 iodine molecules on it, T3 has 3, that's the active form. The reverse T3 is essentially a mirror image of the T3, and the idea is that it can interfere with the T3 receptor, kind of clog it up, if you will, and make it so that the T3 can't elicit its effects. So it does make sense. And again, I'm not big for dogma. We have, the allopathic, practitioners that will say never order reverse T3. It has no clinical significance. And then we have like naturopathic doctors saying only reverse T3. That's too much dogma there. We need to take into account all the nuances of humans. Order the antibodies, as Dave was talking about previously. These are huge. See if there's a autoimmune condition here, and maybe that's being driven by gut health. And maybe we can just fix the gut health, maybe. And then the easy stuff that should have probably been at the top. Look at their vitamin statuses and look at their intake. We really like to use an app called Chronometer, and then we can see what the patient or client is intaking as far as micronutrients. Are they getting enough zinc, iodine, selenium, B12, etc.? And if they're not, fix that first. Add more fruits, vegetables, iodinized salt, etc., and you may never need to actually give medication. So yeah, kind of going back to that, the treatment for this is we kind of have these two dogmas. The allopathic community only gives levothyroxine, which is just crazy to me. Again, sometimes the issue is the conversion of T4 into T3, and so we're just loading them up with with T4, and it's never converting downstream, and they're still symptomatic. They don't feel good. And then we have the naturopathic dogma where everybody gets this natural desiccated thyroid, which is basically pig thyroid dried and given. I think, again, humans are complex and everybody needs targeted, individualized therapy. Dave and I have a friend who utilizes levothyroxine T4 only because his issue is mainly at that T4. He's fine with T3 and he feels best on that. Does that mean everybody should get T4? Absolutely not. When you look at the literature, most people actually feel better on NDT or a mixture of T4 and T3. Does that mean everybody should get it? No, most people may benefit from it, but that's not everybody. So everybody needs an individualized approach. And if you're going anywhere where they're just giving you one thing, including your primary care who only does levothyroxine, you should leave. And conversely, if your clinic only does NDT and tells you that synthetic is bad and you should leave. You need somebody who's really going to work with you as an individual because you're an individual and very complex. So cardiovascular disease, this is again the big one for me, especially coming from abusing a lot of anabolic steroids, which I think probably had a very detrimental effect on my cardiovascular system. I really dove into the literature on this and really wanted to prevent further disease and hopefully reverse some of whatever I had previously done. And again, this is extremely important, and I think all of us need to take this extremely seriously because ASCVD, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, is the leading killer of all of us. So black, white, yellow, purple, the theys out there, the he's and she's, all of them, it's going to kill us all. It's not just one of us. Like, it's not just men. Women die of cardiovascular disease as well. So we need to take this very seriously. So what is cardiovascular disease? I think, again, we need to define what it is because there's a lot of talk about these things and people don't fully understand. And something I always tried to do through all my schooling is make it so that I could understand it. And I think that's a good practitioner can make it in terms that you can understand. So basically, we have this plaque. We've all heard about plaque. Well, what is plaque? This is kind of a scientific definition. It's a focal lesion within the intima. So that's in the most innermost layer of our arteries or our vessels. Characterized by the progressive accumulation of lipids, inflammatory cells, extracellular matrix components, and cellular debris. So it's this buildup of junk essentially within our artery that's going to either stop flow or lead to a big plaque that breaks off and stops flow somewhere else in the body, like to the brain later on. The pathophysiology of this, very important to understand how does this even occur. And it all starts with that first one, the endothelial lining. So the endothelial lining is this very small single cell layer within the artery. So you have very tiny cell wall that when it's damaged, the ApoB containing particles like LDL, ILDL, VLDL, they can kind of stick to the damage within that lining, and then they're going to let in the cholesterol or the lipids into the lining. So it actually goes underneath that lining. And then that lipid gets oxidized, and then our immune system does what it should be doing. I mean, it's all of this is happening due to our immune system kind of responding to something that it should be, but it causes issues down line. So our immune system sends these signals, and our macrophages kind of eat them up. They're like little Pac-Men. They eat them up. They turn into foam cells, and then this leads to more inflammation and eventually becomes this fatty streak that gets this fibrous cap over it, and this continues until you have an actual ball of plaque within the arterial wall. So again, it all starts with the endothelial dysfunction. So this is really big, and this is why we need to start young, when we're young, to preserve our endothelial lining. So not having high blood pressure. For those of us on anabolics, even sometimes TRT can drive our renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system and cause elevated blood pressure. So you don't need to necessarily go on medication. You may need to just increase your cardiovascular output. You may need to increase antioxidants, et cetera, but we need to be monitoring our blood pressure. If you're not checking your blood pressure 2 to 3 times a week, you're doing yourself a disservice, because this is something that you can easily do. It's $20-30 for a monitor on Amazon. You can get one, and you should be. Anything over 120 over 80 is going to be causing damage, mechanical damage to that lining. Just a single cell, super thin. So when you have blood flow through there under high pressures, it will damage that wall. So you need to monitor your blood pressure. Smoking is going to cause a chemical damage to the lining. It's highly inflammatory. So just don't smoke. I can't believe people still smoke. It always baffles me. I think all of us probably know we shouldn't be smoking, though vaping seems to also cause those inflammatory molecules that mess up our endothelial lining. So don't vape either. I mean, just use a nicotine lozenge or whatever if you need that. Insulin resistance and hyperglycemia, again, on the metabolic side, we need to be looking at this because insulin is an inflammatory molecule. High levels of insulin, hyperinsulinemia, will damage endothelial lining, as will that sugar going through that very small vessel with that very small lining will cause issue with it. Inflammatory molecules, and then just aging in general. Just like when you have a hose, eventually it does get old. We all get old. It just is, just what's happened. So aging too. So we need to try to keep this endothelial lining as healthy as possible. So eating lots of fruits and vegetables, getting our antioxidants in, keeping our blood pressure low, trying to avoid these inflammatory molecules. But my question is always, is it possible to go through life without any damage? I would argue likely not. We have a ton of inflammatory particles and things even just in our air from pollution, et cetera. You walk by a guy smoking, you get some secondhand smoke, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We probably will never go through life without any endothelial damage. So this is my pushback against the community that says, don't worry about your lipids as long as your endothelial health is fine, you're gonna be fine. Sure, I would 100% agree, but good luck making it through life without ever damaging your endothelial lining. It likely will not happen. We see plaque starting to develop in teenagers, young kids. That's when we start to see plaque happen. If a kid dies of a homicide, car crash, et cetera, and you look in their artery, they already have a small amount of plaque in there. So it's going to happen to all of us. So I push back against that idea that it doesn't matter how high your lipids are as long as your inflammation is low and your insulin is low. It makes sense in theory, it just doesn't work in practice. So again, it's multifactorial. So like I said, inflammation, insulin, et cetera, but ApoB particles are the common denominator, so we should really try to lower those. And that gets people really upset, like Stan talked about earlier. When any of us mention like statin, we get afraid because so many people hate statins. When you look at the literature on it, it's kind of interesting. Only around 5% of people experience side effects, but the way that they're talked about, you would think it's 95%. And I'm not advocating for statins here. I don't think everybody needs a statin. I'm just saying some people may, but we should try to keep our ApoB as low as possible, ideally without medication, 100%. There are some people who may need medications due to genetics though, and I just wish that we wouldn't demonize them so much because maybe they could benefit from them. Maybe they could live a little bit longer. I don't think nature intended for us to live very long. I think that it wanted us to have babies probably around 18 or so, and then it was done with us. And that's why we produce these ApoB containing particles. But if we're gonna push against that, we should try to lower it. So yeah, and then this is another thing is in these communities, in these chats, you often hear drive your LDL up high because you need it to make hormones. Again, makes sense, but I think the people who say this don't understand basic lipidology. They don't understand basic biochemistry. Every single cell in our body contains cholesterol and can make cholesterol. So the serum cholesterol, just like we were talking about estradiol, really doesn't mean much. So you can lower your serum cholesterol down to virtually nothing. We have studies on it. We have these new drugs, PCSK9 inhibitors, that will basically eliminate your LDL cholesterol. We've brought it down to 15 milligrams per deciliter, and there was no negative effect on the production of sex hormones, again, because the cells can create their own cholesterol to make the testosterone, et cetera. So again, not advocating for everybody to get on a cholesterol-lowering medication, but we shouldn't be fear-mongering, telling that people that as soon as they lower their LDL, that they're going to have low testosterone. It's just not the case. It's not true. And the same goes for our brain. These people didn't have brain fog, et cetera. Our brain makes its own cholesterol. It doesn't get it from the serum levels. We're only measuring the serum. We want the serum lower because that's what causes issues in the artery. So when you're looking for cardiovascular health on the lab panels for your patients, your clients, these are some that I really like. Obviously a standard lipid panel, but that is not enough. I don't think it tells the whole story. I think we need to take a deeper dive. So ApoB is big, and ApoB is that protein that wraps around these cholesterol molecules. So the IDL, VLDL, LDL, all of those atherosclerotic all those atherosclerotic cholesterols, basically. Lp(a), this one's huge. It's mainly genetic too. You really only need this test one time in life. If somebody's routinely ordering this on you, they're probably trying to get money out of you because as of now, we don't have any agents that will lower it. Some are in the pipeline undergoing trials right now. Obviously, we do need to keep our insulin down. We need to keep our CRP down. We shorter things like homocysteine because homocysteine can cause the endothelial damage. ADMA, that's going to inhibit nitric oxide production. Myeloperoxidase, great marker for inflammation. I'm sure some of you have never even seen some of these, but these are, cardiovascular health is really in depth. We should be ordering much more than just a lipid panel. And if somebody's telling you something like your ratio is okay, they're living in the 90s. Like we have updated our literature and our knowledge so much that we shouldn't even be talking about things like ratios. There's much more, bigger things that we can look at, much more in depth. So this is, I give the credit to Dave Lee because I love this quote from him. What should we do to help, with this physiology? Do the things that your grandmother would have told you to do. I love that because it's so simple, but all of us forget that for some reason. I laugh because Huberman has like 4 or 5 million subscribers, and the dude literally tells people to go outside, look at the sun, run, like these basic principles that humans should have known what to do. Now we need to be told to go outside. It's just insane, but it's true. So, literally just try to live like your grandparents would have. Try to go outside and get sweaty and get in the sun and have good, meaningful relationships, et cetera, et cetera. Eat whole foods. And this is a thing that I try not to get too dogmatic about. I don't think it's that complex. I think we should just try to eat things that grow, things that live. I think we should try to eat multiple colors. I think that we should have high protein diets. I think we should aim to have low saturated fat. My pushback against the carnivore community eating ancestral is I don't think that they had fatted cows that they put butter all over. Any of the hunters out there will know when you kill like a deer or something, that meat is lean as hell. Most people don't like it. That's why they don't like it that much because it's so damn lean. That stuff is leaner than chicken breast because wild game is very lean. Those animals are out there starving. So you think that we were killing these fatted, saturated, fat-loaded animals? I highly doubt it. I've seen people who live ancestral who live off of the things that they kill only, and their ApoB is usually pristine and perfect. So I do think we should try to aim to have lower saturated fat in our diet. Most importantly, though, it really doesn't matter. Just don't overeat. Historically, our ancestors probably did not overeat for prolonged periods of time. We did when we had it, and that wasn't all the time. So we function best off of not overeating. We actually function better when we are kind of hungry sometimes. So you should get hungry sometimes as well. If you need to, supplement with micros and try to do that with food-based supplements, if you can. If you can't and synthetic is all you have, fine. For example, I try to use like greens powders over a multivitamin. Is it better? I don't know. Probably not if you put them in the literature. I just feel better eating something that came from the earth that wasn't synthetically made. Things like liver capsules, et cetera, can be great too for fat-soluble vitamins. But you don't need to be a zealot. I think too much of us are into these camps, whether it be politics or nutrition, whatever. We just get so crazy about this stuff. I don't think it's that complex. Just don't eat too much. Get outside, get good sleep, try to resistance train 3 to 4 times weekly. Zone 2 cardio is great. Try to do some mobility. So these are just kind of standard recommendations I give to clients. This one is big, psychological health. So getting away from all the science stuff. This is the part that's hard, I think, for a lot of us. 1 in 6 people these days have depression. 1 in 5 have some sort of mental disorder. Why? This was from my friend Dan Coe. I don't know if any of you know him, but he's kind of big on social media. He made this post, and I thought it really talked to most of us. Wake up, hit snooze 4 times, stare at your phone, roll out of bed, make coffee, sit in traffic, 8 hours of unfulfilling work, sit in traffic again, argue with your significant other, walk the pet, watch TV, pass out, repeat. Is there any question why we're unhappy? This is the majority of our lives. This is something that even I deal with. It's hard because I work so hard. Sometimes I'm unfulfilled, and it weighs on me for sure. So it's something that we need to, take into consideration, even with our guys. If we're just fixing their hormones, we've knocked off one of the 3 pillars. We need to work on their psychological health as well. So do all of these things. And with men, it's kind of hard. I've always loved this recommendation, this quote. I think I have a piece of art that says, live the life you love the life you live. And I've always felt that way. If you're not loving something in your life, then just change it. Easier said than done, but work to make progress in your life and work to make a life that you're proud to live. Find meaning. And this is big for us men, especially younger men. Meaning is not a quick buck or a quick fuck. When we get things easy, it's not very fulfilling. If you're just, getting pussy every other night, that's not fulfilling. Eventually it ends up, just being very, very old and empty, and it leaves you searching for more. So do hard things. A relationship is a hard thing. Find a spouse, put a lot of work into it. Find a career. If someone's going to give you quick money, you don't want that. You want to work hard for something and achieve something. The working is going to really help our psychological health. Get off of our phones. Connect with humans. This one is huge. Just a few weekends ago, we went to the Swiss convention in Ohio. My wife and I were there. We talked to our patient care coordinator, Michael Warner, in the hallway when we were passing through. And Victoria and I, my wife over there, she's a dietitian. We work our asses off. Pretty much all we do is work like 7 days a week. We're always inside. We talked to our friend Michael in the hallway for like 5 minutes. When we got back to the room, she was glowing, like so happy. She said, I feel so happy because we just like talked to another human being, and we forget that. I mean, even if we're just on Zoom and things, we forget that there's something really special about human connection. So everything that we're doing here is awesome. This is huge for our psychological health. And pet dogs, I think that this is really important. It doesn't have to be dogs if you like cats or whatever you like. I really like dogs, but I think just connecting with other living beings is huge and great for our mental health. Meditate, breathwork, therapy. The big thing here is you're not less of a man if you do these things. For some reason, this has been stigmatized as being a female thing. Therapy is not a gender thing. Everybody could benefit by talking to other people, working things out through breathing, through meditating, etc. If it's not your thing, like I don't really do the breath. Well, I try to do some breath work on my own, try to meditate on my own. It doesn't need to be like you go to a class. It doesn't necessarily mean to be going to therapy. You could just talk to a friend. But search for these things, find these things, and it doesn't make you less of a man. And then this one's really big, spirituality. And this one's a really tough one for me because, like I said, I was raised in a very religious household and very spiritual household too. I don't think the two are the same thing, but when I got into science, I became, for a little bit, maybe an atheist and then kind of agnostic, and my spiritual health was lacking to some extent. And I really struggled with what is spirituality, and I don't think there is any one definition for spirituality, but I've tried to come up with one, and this is kind of, these next slides are my definition of spirituality. So it often involves a sense of transcendence or a connection to something greater than yourself. It can be divine, it can be cosmic, or it can be a deep connection to nature or the universe. It can encompass religious beliefs, but it also includes non-religious or secular forms of spirituality, which is big for me because I really didn't like religion anymore coming out of the household that I came to. But finding that there was, other ways to express my spirituality was big. Again, religion is one expression of spirituality, but it isn't the only form. Everyone experiences spirituality differently. There is no right or wrong way. That's the beauty of it. I found this study in 2020, Frontiers of Psychology, found that people in tune with their spirituality had better psychological health. And then their better psychological health, surprise, surprise, led to better physiological health. So they're all connected again. So again, this is some definitions: experiencing transcendence through inner peace, harmony, or connectedness to others. Transcendence can take place both within the person via self-realization, self-improvement, and personal development, and outside the person. External transcendence may be directed at a higher entity or energy to another person, claimed to be a particular value whose good is more important than one's own good, or to the universe. So there's a lot of ways that we can express our spirituality. It doesn't need to be to a deity. It doesn't need to be hugging trees. It could be whatever you want. It could be a mixture of all of them. There's a lot of ways to express one's spirituality. Exercise can be a highly spiritual experience for a lot of us. And if we stop and think about it, sometimes we've had some pretty spiritual experiences doing some exercise. Work can be a spiritual experience, and I would try to make it as such. Try to realize that you're doing something that's helping greater good. You're helping society. Even if you're flipping burgers, you're providing somebody else with food that is going to sustain them and make them live. So you can find spirituality in everything that you do. When you start doing that, I think it does help to develop you as a person. A relationship, I think, is highly spiritual. This summit is a spiritual experience. We're all coming together. We're all here for a greater good. So there's a lot of ways to express this. So Carl Jung said, as far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light of meaning in the darkness of mere being. So find your meaning and find your purpose. I think this is huge. If you find meaning as a man in particular, this is something a lot of us struggle with. Men are very, very, very unhappy these days. It's because we don't have meaning and we don't have purpose. We need to find that meaning and find that purpose. Whether that's being, the head of your company and taking care of the employees, or taking care of your wife or your children, whatever it is, find your purpose. And when you do, it will be huge. And for all of our clients and things, young men, I see a lot of men just struggling. They don't have purpose. So help them to find their purpose, whatever it may be. So I don't know if any of you know The Watchmen. I'm kind of a nerd sometimes. Watchmen's a graphic novel. This is Dr. Manhattan. He's essentially become this jacked being, and he has a hydrogen atom, so he's a mixture of masculinity and nerdness like I like. There's this scene in the graphic novel and in the movie, if you've ever seen it. And essentially, he's up on Mars kind of pondering existence, and he doesn't like humans anymore. He thinks that they're just a mess. He wants to go live on Mars, but he's in love with a human. And this woman just found out that her father raped her mother, and that's how she was born. And she's just kind of all messed up. And he talks to her, and he has this realization about humans. And this often chokes me up. I told Victoria, I hope I don't cry up here, which is, it's not a female thing to cry. It's not an estrogenic thing to cry. It's a very good thing to cry, man. We should realize this. But hopefully I don't cry. But this always gets me touched up. So he's talking about human beings. He says thermodynamic miracles, events against the odds so astronomical, they are effectively impossible, like oxygen spontaneously becoming gold. I long to observe such a thing. So he's looking for something like a miracle. And he says, and yet each human coupling, 1,000 million sperm vie for a single egg. Multiply those odds by countless generations against the odds of our ancestors being alive, meeting, searing the precise son, that exact daughter, until your mother loves a man she has every reason to hate. And in that union of thousands of millions of children competing for fertilization, it was you, only you, that emerged to distill so specific a form, that chaos of improbability like turning air into gold. That is a crowning unlikelihood, the thermodynamic miracle. And she asks him, well, if my birth, if that's a thermodynamic miracle, you could say that about anybody in the world. He says, yes, anybody in the world. But the world is so full of people, so crowded with these miracles, they become so commonplace and I forget. We gaze continually at the world as if it grows dull in our perceptions, yet seen from another's vantage point, as if new, it may still take our breath away. He tells her, come, dry your eyes, for you are life, rarer than a quark, unpredictable beyond the dreams of Heisenberg. The clay which forces that shape of all things leave the fingerprints most clearly. Dry your eyes, let's go home. So he realizes that we are all miracles. That gives me purpose. When I realize that, my DNA has fought for potentially millions of years to get here on this stage, I am filled with just overwhelming gratitude and just I feel a purpose that I need to continue to make this life a good thing, to impart my love on others and to just make a dent in this world. But just realize, I think, again, a lot of young men are struggling. What is my purpose? Well, remind them that you're a miracle. You're literally a miracle. Your birth is a miraculous thing. You have a purpose. You're going to find it and try to help them with that. So yeah, having the belief that this is a life that's special is really beyond fulfilling. So in conclusion, optimization, highly individual, multifaceted. My definition of optimization of all facets must be equally addressed. Again, if one of these is out of whack, the person is not fully optimized, in my opinion. I think a lot of us have the physiological stuff down. We're going to talk mainly about the physiological stuff, but that's only one facet of a very, very complex existence. So yeah, that's kind of it. If you have questions, we can go over those now if we have time. I don't know. You can find me here. I expect everybody to subscribe to my YouTube right now. I mean it. Pull out your phones and do. No, I'm just kidding. But please do. There's my YouTube, Instagram if you want, or you can email me if you have any questions. Anybody have any questions?
Thanks for that. That was great. So I run a practice literally called health optimization because I can't find a better word.
Yeah, me too. That's my business, Atlas Optimization.
Yeah, and it sucks because you can't market that
right.
word. Yeah. So that's the next talk is marketing optimization for physicians. But my question is with the spirituality, because I have a similar, in some ways probably optimization pyramid, spiritual health is on the bottom corner, foundational pillar, but I don't know what to do with it. So is there a way that you have found that you can actively push this into a conversation with patients? I don't know what your interaction is like with patients, but...
Yeah, it's tough, especially even in my practice now. I only have 30 minutes with a patient, and sometimes just getting through the physiology is hard. And I think that's where I've actually referred people to Dave. Go to Dave because Dave can give you a lot of one-on-one attention. He can dive into things like that. But it's hard. I mean, sometimes you can tell that somebody's out of whack in one of those vectors for sure, either psychologically or spiritually. And then you just kind of try to work it in, I guess. How to express it, I don't know. Try to work with the people. If religion's off the table, then, you work on other vectors. It's hard. It's tough, though. I think everybody's, so individualistic. It's tough.
Yeah.
All right, so if a client comes to you and they say, I want to get in touch with my spiritual side more, what literature would you recommend for them? Who have you learned from, and where would you guide them to say, they're like, yeah, the TRT is one part of it, like you said, but the spirituality is a huge part. Where would you send them?
Oh, that's a loaded question too, because there's so many spiritual texts out there. It really, are we going to go religious, or are we just going to look into philosophy? I think just having a general, understanding of philosophy, start with the great philosophers first, because they're asking all those big questions, and just realize that there's more to human existence than, at the cellular level. So start with the early philosophers. The Greek philosophers are great. And then even things like whether you're Christian or not, the Bible's a great book. Whether, all of the religions have a lot of really good things that you can take away from them. So just urge them to, look outside of Instagram and try to read some of the ancient texts, honestly.
Like the Socrates, the Plato's.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom to be gained in there.
All right, so we work in a space where testosterone's really asked a lot, and someone comes in, hey, I'm just seeing if TRT is something good for me. How do you change the narrative to be like, hey, let's look at these other things, kind of like what you talked about up there? Yeah,
that's so hard again, because TRT has become like bastardized, unfortunately, due to all the money behind it. Again, it's advertised as like the end all be all. And people literally come saying like, I feel great. Do I need testosterone? I'm like, well, you already don't understand the whole thing, because testosterone, like if you feel great, you don't need testosterone likely. So it's tough. And we kind of just try to have that conversation like, well, what would testosterone actually do? These guys usually are, when they're in that, they have fine levels. And so you just kind of explain to them that testosterone's one piece of a very complex organism. I know that it got advertised to you in a way that everybody needs it, because we're really good at marketing, but there's a lot of other stuff that goes into your existence. We should try to focus on those too.
So you mentioned a lot of stuff about labs at the beginning. As it relates to things like mental health, I realize there's not necessarily anything you can point to as far as causation for different things, but if the goal is to support maybe somebody who's in therapy, maybe even using pharmaceuticals to help with depression, is there anything that you might find has a fairly strong correlation when it comes to looking at labs that could be beneficial to kind of complement the process?
100%. And I wish that we looked at hormones more than we do. Unfortunately, we put anybody and everybody who has some type of, they're sad for a day, they get put on an SSRI. We can't test for the things that SSRIs are treating. We don't test for levels of serotonin in the brain. They may have a deficiency in a very treatable hormone like testosterone or estradiol, we talked about earlier, thyroid, et cetera. So I think, when you see guys with low testosterone, they're often very depressed as well. So try to fix those things that you can fix first, same with thyroid. And then, if we fix all of those kind of hormones and the person is still depressed, maybe they do need something like an SSRI. But I think that we should be treating those first, even metabolic health. Insulin has a massive effect on our brain. Very, very bad effect in a lot of ways. Even things like insulin resistance, obesity starts like in the brain due to the effect of insulin on it. So just fixing their metabolic health may have a profound effect on their mental health. So yeah, I think we should be looking at serum levels and trying to fix those first before ever throwing in medications that we can't really test for.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
It's amazing. I think my question, I'm also a physician, is first to let you know, amazing that you've gone that route, that you've added 50% of the healing, which is the spiritual, psychological part, which our Western mind and our scientific mind kind of went away from.
Yeah.
And that's first something amazing. But if we even go back to the physiologic part, where, again, we had to unlearn a lot of what we learned during med school, where they told us testosterone was dangerous. And we still see those patients who come to us who have their beloved primary care who told them this is dangerous for you.
Right.
They get medical gaslighting, where the physician's trying to tell them it's just in your mind. And our role is to really try to make the patient have be more decisive in knowing what they want without talking too bad about our colleagues.
Right.
I walk that talk a lot. I've become more assertive, where I just tell the patient, fire your doctor.
Yeah.
But walking that line, how do you walk that line?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, with us, like when we send them for a lab requisition, it's like, like 3 pages of just a lab rec with like 50 markers, and they bring it to their primary care. And then I understand the side of the primary care 100%. As Dr. Grant alluded to earlier, we're taught like don't go looking for things unless you're going to treat it. Like don't over order that because that can be detrimental to the patient. I fully understand that. But in the same vein, I'm like, well, I feel like I have the right to look under my own hood, and so should you. So a lot of times we get kicked back just on, looking at what's going on in our bodies. So it's tough. I mean, I tell them I understand where your doctor's coming from. Try to explain to them that this is not just routine, like reactive medicine. We're truly trying to prevent here, or just leave your doctor out of it because they don't need to know, honestly, because you're paying through this for cash, unfortunately. I hope. It's hard because I don't think that we'll ever get to a point where insurance is trying to really truly prevent. It's just, it costs too much and there's so much that goes on there. But yeah, I kind of just tell them, you can bring them in, kind of gauge your doctor, see if they're open-minded, great, and hopefully they can order some of this stuff for you. You don't have to do it for cash, but yeah, it's tough.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Adam, thank you so much. Let's give him a round of applause.